It's the Wilk Report. I'm Michael Wilk, coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio, and today I'm doing a spoiler-laden review of Halloween 2018. Now, the film is directed by David Gordon Green through Blumhouse. John Carpenter produced, as you know. And it's really a reset of the continuity. It takes the old Godzilla Toho technique of eliminating all sequels except for the first, and just going as a direct sequel to the first film. If you're familiar with Toho and their Godzilla series, various reboots and incarnations, it's pretty much the same thing. The pre-credits scene shows a couple of British documentarians trying to get Michael Myers to speak. He's been confined in Smith's Grove for 40 years following his murder spree on Halloween in 1978. And then it cuts to the credits. Now, the credits, I should point out, are an interesting bit of PR for the film, because it starts off with a collapsed jack-o'-lantern, something that's been left out so long it's just collapsed in on itself, it's rotted away. And then as the credits roll and the music plays, it's you see a gradual reversal of this process to where it, by the time the credits have finished, it is restored and like new. And this is not an accident, okay? There are two ways to interpret this. The first way to interpret this is that this is kind of like hitting the rewind button back on 40 years of Halloween continuity and going back to the beginning, and picking up from where the first film left off. Another way of looking at it is really kind of restoring something that had been it had been done to death to the point where it just kind of collapsed in. The franchise itself had collapsed under its own weight, and this is kind of like restoring Halloween to itself, and kind of breathing new life into it. So those are two ways to interpret it, and they might actually might hold both meanings. So excuse me, I'm still getting over a cold. So, in that light, the director is giving us a very clear indication of what he feels this movie is. That is, it's a not only telling you what this movie is going to be, it's actually really kind of saying, okay, yeah, this is, this is really breathing new life into it. So, to the extent that this is true, it kind of does, because once Michael Myers busts out of prison, in fact, actually, let me backtrack a little bit, because before he busts out of prison, the documentarians go visit Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. She has, in the intervening 4 decades, really become like this extreme survivalist. She's a basket case by her own admission. In fact, she literally says, I'm a basket case. So, this has traumatized her, and the film is as much an exploration of what seeing your three of your friends killed brutally and left for you to find them does to a person, or could do to a person. And you either you're either consumed by your fear or you face it head on. And in this case, she has spent the last 4 decades really kind of preparing for the day she knows is going to come, which is Michael Myers eventually escaping and killing again. So, then of course he does escape, but not before she goes to see off the bus that's going to transfer him to a maximum security facility there, to spend the rest of his days. But, then there's a scene in a restaurant where her granddaughter and daughter and son-in-law are all gathered. There's this interesting family dynamic because Laurie Strode has had a daughter whom she tried to raise, really to defend herself and kind of be the same kind of survivalist paranoid that she is, but obviously she kind of rebelled against that. And so, there's efforts to keep her away from the granddaughter, and those kind of backfire because Laurie really kind of ignores pretty much everything, and the granddaughter is pretty upset at her mother for trying to keep her from her grandmother because she doesn't feel that she's as bad as her mother says she is. So there's all sorts of family dynamics going on here, but then of course Michael does eventually escape and not only dispatches the two documentarians but also pretty much the entire staff at the gas station where they stop off. So of course he retrieves his mask from them, and then it goes pretty much from there. There's a kind of a twist because the guy they've got playing the new Loomis is really he's not. That's all I'm going to say. It's one of the parts in the movie I actually did not like. There were parts of the film I liked, parts of it I didn't like, but I think the positives outweigh the negatives. Not by much, but there was more to like than there was not to like. The dynamic with the doctor, there's a lot of things in Halloween 2018 that Halloween 1978, it kind of reverses. And the two major parts I'm going to get to in a minute. But first I want to kind of go into one thing that I had read online where it was kind of stated that Michael Myers is not going to be immortal in the new film. And I kind of felt that was a cop-out because there's a... if you look at the first film, okay, you see him getting stabbed in the neck with a sewing needle, a very long sewing needle. It goes, pretty far into his neck. Then he gets stabbed in the chest, like right in the middle, about where the heart would be. And then, of course, he's shot 6 times. There's no way an actual human being would survive any of that. I don't care how much of an adrenaline rush you're on. You're not going to survive that if you're a normal human being. You just won't. So, this idea that Michael Myers is just an ordinary, if insane and insanely strong human being no, it doesn't work. And let me see if I can call that up, actually. Alright, so calling that up right now. Sorry, my connection's being a bit slow right now. We'll get this up in just a second. And while my browser is misbehaving, let's go ahead and update the image here. By the way, I really like the mask here. You can see it up from the still. It's awesome. It's been aged pretty well, in my opinion. You've got... okay, so here's a scene where Laurie Strode, after Michael Myers gets out, she sees him in the window of a house where he's just killed again. And she takes aim with her gun and fires at what she thinks is him, but it turns out it's his reflection in a mirror, and he gets away, but not before shooting him and in the shoulder. And of course he just walks away and kind of shrugs it off like it never happened. So, and, again, this is kind of like, goes to what I said, and, just a couple minutes ago, where there's a contradiction here. Because on the one hand, you're saying there's nothing supernatural about Michael Myers. He's not immortal, and yet he continues to take injuries that would kill another human being. So I don't buy this whole claim that Michael Myers is not immortal in either the first Halloween or in the new 2018 iteration. I'm sorry, but no, I'm just not buying it. And neither should you, because again, it's just not realistic. You can't contradict this rule once it's been set up, and set up so clearly that, because, yeah, and, this is, let's see here. All right, CBR, no, hang on, Danny McBride. Okay, yeah, Danny McBride was one of the, alright, this is, yeah, sorry, my browser is misbehaving. Let's see. Alright, so now while we're waiting for that to show up, yeah, this is what happens when you get no good internet connection and you're just running off your crappy laptop. Alright, here it comes finally. Yeah, from horrorfreaknews.com. And this was actually from last year, about May 13th, 2017. Yeah, freaking ads. And you wonder why people get ad block. Alright, article says, it's been a couple months since we've had any updates on the Halloween reboot currently in the works at Blumhouse. The film is being held by David Gordon Green, who's co-writing the script with his frequent collaborator Danny McBride. And now in February, and again this was back in 2017, McBride offered some hints at the direction he and Green will take the established Halloween mythologies and how the new film will be unique. To recap, McBride, it's not a remake. It's going to continue the story of Michael Myers in a really grounded way. And for our mythology, we're focusing mainly on the first two movies and what that sets up, and then where the story can go from there. And of course, the source is from Cinema Blend, or as Rob Gallo at Midnight's Edge likes to say, Cinema Bland. And then, of course, it goes again, McBride, I think we're just trying to strip it down and just take it back to what was so good about the original. It was just very simple and just achieved that level of horror that wasn't corny, and it wasn't turning Michael Myers into some supernatural being that couldn't be killed. That stuff to me isn't scary. I want to be scared by something that I really think could happen. But, again, this is really a cheat because, again, you're depicting Michael Myers taking injuries that would kill or seriously incapacitate another human being. So, to me, this is a major plot loophole. You don't contradict something that's been set up like this, and then go to say, oh, this is how it's going to be. No, you have to stick within the established rules. And again, here's a couple of brief screen caps, Laurie with her granddaughter, and then Michael Myers as he exits the house where he's just killed a couple more people. But yeah, you show him taking a shot to the shoulder. You show him getting, and when he retrieves his masks and kills the two British people, he takes a crowbar to the skull, shrugs that off, and overpowers a grown man who's like at least 40 years his junior. And it's just not believable to say that Michael Myers isn't immortal somehow, especially a guy who is supposed to be 61 years old within the film. There's just no believable way he's not immortal, or at least something about him that makes him, because John Carpenter himself, kind of depicted Michael Myers more as a concept of evil, which is why he disappears at the end of the first film, and and is kind of like unkillable because he's not human. He's literally a concept more than he is an actual character. So, I really kind of don't buy this in the film. That's the one big criticism I have. The other criticism I have is how they handle the new Doctor, who apparently is very protective of Michael Myers to the point where he actually kills on his behalf to try and save him because he's obsessed with trying to get Michael Myers to speak to him, something that nobody's been able to do in over 5 decades since he kills his sister in 1963. So I didn't like that either. It offered no real reason to have that character in there in the first place. If you're going to have a new Loomis, and in fact, Laurie actually asks him, "Oh, so you're the new Dr. Loomis?" And that question is unanswered, mainly because he's not. Because and this is kind of one of the reversals between Halloween in 1978 and Halloween 2018, where Donald Pleasance's character in the first film serves as exposition, kind of telling you how evil Michael Myers is, rather than showing us until the second half of the film when he starts his killing spree. Then you can actually see how evil he is. But do you really need someone there to tell you? So really, there's no need for exposition in this one because we already know the basic story. We've got 40 years of sequels and remakes and reboots and whatever, and it just, we get it. We know it all, so we don't need exposition. So in that sense, you don't even really need his doctor there in the first place. And, that he may have helped him escape in the first place in order to try and get some kind of reunion between him and Laurie Strode and kind of see what happens. I mean, it just strains the bounds of credibility here. I thought it was contrived and really didn't make sense and really added nothing to the story. So I'm going to kind of take points off of Halloween 2018 for that reason, and for, again, the contradicting, trying to make Michael Myers I wouldn't say normal, but, an ordinary human being, which he's clearly not. So, I'm going to take points off for those two. Now, the parts that I liked, the dynamic between Laurie, her daughter, her grandmother, and, how all this trauma has affected Laurie and is spilled over onto the daughter and the granddaughter, who really has no concept of what all this was, because it's, something that happened before she was even born, and she's trying to have this relationship with her grandmother, who uncharacteristically, because she takes like $3,000 from the British documentarians to speak to her, and gives it to her granddaughter and tells her to like take a trip to Europe or something, or do something, life affirming or whatever, and says fuck college. It's like, well, that's not something Laurie Strode would say. So, this kind of shows the dynamic, what 40 years following extreme trauma would do to a person, where it just kind of has the capacity to destroy you and turn you into a wreck emotionally and mentally, where she even breaks into her daughter's home just to kind of prove a point on how insecure the place is. And then, it's an interesting character dynamic, and I thought the movie really could have focused a little bit more on that. If you're going to show that, then just focus more on that. You don't need to have this idea of the doctor really kind of this time helping Michael Myers instead of trying to stop him. It's just pointless. So then of course we get to and the next big reversal. And again, this is something I actually liked a great deal, because in the first film, Michael Myers is the one setting the trap. Okay, you ever wonder why the Shape doesn't run? He just calmly walks everywhere instead of running after people. It's because he doesn't have to. I mean, the first film, he goes ahead and spends the entire day of Halloween and well into the night setting up the trap for Laurie Strode and luring her over, with her, first he kills her friends, and he kind of uses them to lure her over to the house where, he springs a trap and that, scares her and tries to kill her, and then she escapes, and she makes a beeline right for the place he knows she's going to go to, which is right across the street to protect her charges. So he doesn't have to run after her. He can take his time and be very methodical about everything he does, which is why he never runs. And there's and now 40 years later he's out, and there's none of that. The moment he gets his mask back on, he goes right back to Haddonfield because that's his old stomping grounds. It's his territory. And, he just starts a random killing spree, going after babysitters, mothers, killing people, rather brutally. And, there is kind of one scene in there where he makes one of his next kills where he really, he snuck into the house because the door's been left open, but he kind of hides in a closet, and when the babysitter goes to close it, then the door opens, and then he comes after everyone. But he's really more just kind of reacting on pure instinct. He's been bottled up for 40 years, and the moment he gets out, he just starts killing because making up for lost time because that's what he wanted to do. But he doesn't really seem to have much of a plan this time around. So this time it's more Michael Myers reacting and just going on pure instinct. Whereas Laurie Strode now is the one setting the trap. Her entire house, as it turns out, has been built to be one big trap for Michael Myers, and he's now the one being lured in for the final confrontation. And so that was a nice twist, and I actually like that reversal, because now Laurie Strode is the one who's had all this time and being incredibly patient and biding her time. Of course, things don't actually go exactly the way she envisioned. People die who really don't need to, and she would rather they didn't. But ultimately, the trap is sprung, and things turn out the way they do. But, she's the one who's now planning and setting traps for Michael Myers. So, and, there's this dynamic where the doctor kind of points it out. They've spent 40 years kind of like really kind of fearing and hating each other, and really kind of, each one is afraid of the same thing as being dominated and ultimately killed by the other. And that fear and that hatred and that desire for revenge is basically what keeps them both going. Which, again, you didn't really need the doctor there to explain that because he's kind of useless. And really, I don't see how a medical doctor would become so enamored with his own patient that he would actually help him escape and then actively kill to defend him, and then try and it just doesn't work as a storytelling device. So I'm gonna, like I said, that's something I have to take off points for, along with some of the that this whole idea that he's mortal, then he's not immortal, but we clearly see him taking injuries that would drop an ordinary person. So but other than that, I really have no complaints. I mean, one thing I did note is that the film really had a lot more gore in it than the original did. Because the original, you really didn't need any, because the terror was more psychological than anything else, and John Carpenter really, it was a different era, and you could get away with the kind of more subtle, understated horror back in the 70s than you could do today, where today audiences kind of demand it. But I think director Green and his co-writer McBride really did a good job of balancing, modern desire for blood and gore with more kind of terrifying. I mean, there's really no jump cuts here. The movie is well paced. I will give it that. It's just under 2 hours, but it doesn't feel like 2 hours. It feels kind of like an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. But it's like, I mean, it doesn't feel too long. It doesn't feel like it's dragging. It doesn't feel like it's gone by too quickly. You're actually given some time to digest what's going on there, and time enough to actually kind of question, why this is going on. Some bits of it, but for the most part, I think they did pretty well. And if you look at the box office totals, and I keep going back to this, and I'm going to keep doing it just to kind of illustrate the point. As of yesterday, November 4th. Domestic box office gross is $150 million, $150,408,705. And when you combine that with the $79,200,000 foreign, we're talking a film that's got worldwide box office gross of $229.6 million on a production budget of $10 million. And even if you say, okay, yeah, they spent at least as much on, marketing and distribution as they did on producing it. Even if you put that high-end estimate, total budget at $20 million, you're still looking at something that has far, far surpassed it. I mean, the profits relative to the budget pretty much guarantee a sequel. So you're really not going to... And of course, the movie ends on a note that kind of makes it... difficult to bring it back. And, I don't want to spoil the ending because I've already given enough spoilers here. But you don't want to write off the possibility completely. All right, because you don't actually see Michael Myers dying in this one. I mean, it's pretty heavily suggested, but you don't actually see it happening. So, and of course, with this box office gross, I mean, the movie has done so well that there's no way there's not going to be a sequel to this. So, I would say keep an eye out. I will certainly do that, and I'm going to try and have a discussion on this. I know it's pretty late and people have moved on already, but I want to have a multi-person discussion because I want to get other people's perspectives as well as my own. But and then of course I want to talk about Goblin Slayer, the last couple of episodes, some of the Star Wars news that's out there that is more laughable. And as it turns out, Midnight's Edge has been officially banned from one of the Facebook Star Trek fan groups, one of the larger ones, apparently for no other reason than they don't like that they keep criticizing STD and the Kelvin movies, and and they're making a bunch of false accusations against Midnight's Edge, saying that they're spreading lies and stirring up the proverbial shit pot, and which is itself, it's bullshit. So I'll be trying to do a segment with those guys and try and get to the bottom of this, because it just seems like pretty hilarious. But that's pretty much it as far as my review. If you like what you've heard, if you want to hear more, feel free to subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive notifications whenever I upload new content. And by all means, click the link to the Patreon page and become a subscriber there to receive the rewards that we've got there, and also kind of help us keep this going and make improvements, because we do want to bring you the best podcast that we can. So that's it for the Wilk Report for now. Saying take care, good night, I'm out.